Okay, let's dive right into this. Imagine, just for a second, what it would actually be like if one day you walk past a mirror and the person staring back at you wasn't just a reflection. What if it was an exact, living, breathing copy of you? I mean, not some robotic AI, but a true flesh and blood clone with your memories, your mind, your everything. Now, picture that visceral scenario. That very first moment this clone opens its eyes and looks right at you. It realizes it's you, and you realize it's also you. In that single explosive second, everything we think we know about identity, responsibility, privacy, and, wow, even love would be turned completely upside down. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack how this wild scenario wouldn't just be some cool scientific breakthrough. It would be a complete ground-up rewrite of human life.
So I have to ask you directly, what if you could live two lives at once? Because let's be real. Initially, most of us watching this would probably view this as the ultimate absolute dream. Just think about it. You could finally defeat time, that relentless enemy we're constantly racing against. You could literally split your existence right down the middle and immediately double your capacity to experience the world.
You could finally put an end to all that procrastination and the constant nagging guilt of just not doing enough. Imagine the sheer freedom of this setup. You could be comfortably lounging on your couch, reading a good book, studying, or jet-setting around the world, all while your clone perfectly handles your high-stress job, your mundane daily chores, and hey, maybe even those awkward holiday family dinners. Productivity wouldn't just increase, it would absolutely skyrocket. For the very first time in human history, one person could actually manage the impossible demands of modern life.
We all have this perfect, super tempting fantasy in our heads, right? Original you gets to sleep in, rest up, and just enjoy life, while clone you happily takes on the daily grind, the chores, and those endless Zoom meetings. It sounds magical, literally magical. You could be fast asleep while your identical assistant tackles your overflowing inbox. But here comes the devastating bait and switch. This beautiful dream, yeah, it would only survive for a very, very short time before reality comes crashing down.
Because as it turns out, doubling yourself doesn't actually double your peace. It completely doubles the burden. Welcome to what we're calling the burnout trap. You see, society wouldn't just grant you this newfound freedom. Oh, no. If one person can suddenly do the work of two, what do you think happens? Businesses would instantly stop hiring extra workers. Families would suddenly expect you to take on twice the responsibilities. The intense pressure to produce would just go off the charts. What started out as a technological miracle to reduce your personal burden would rapidly, and I mean rapidly, devolve into massive human exploitation. Society would simply demand double the output from your duplicated life.
And honestly, that's just the economic side of things. Imagine the absolute legal chaos if one face suddenly equaled two distinct, walking, talking people. I mean, how does HR handle two identical employees applying for the exact same job? Who gets the house? Is the clone responsible for your credit card debt? Wait, do they get to vote in the next election? Can they legally sign a contract? Governments would literally have to completely redefine personhood from scratch. Our entire world is built on the fundamental assumption that each face belongs to one unique individual. The instant a clone exists, that assumption is just utterly destroyed.
But honestly, all that legal chaos totally pales in comparison to the emotional crisis. Who actually owns your identity? Because remember, your clone isn't arriving as some blank, obedient robot servant. It arrives with your childhood memories, your deepest fears, and your exact willpower. At some point, that clone's going to look you dead in the eye and declare, I am not your helper, I am not your backup, I am me. And that sentence, wow. It's beautiful because it proves they are a real conscious person, but it is absolutely terrifying because you are no longer dealing with a simple tool. You're dealing with another self who might want its own name, its own freedom, and, well, your future.
Which brings us right into the psychological war. Creating a clone essentially externalizes your own mind. Everything you hide inside is suddenly standing right there in front of you. If you're insecure, well, your clone is insecure. If you carry trauma or guilt, the clone is carrying that exact same trauma and guilt. You would be forced to argue with someone who knows every single weakness, every single secret you've ever tried to bury. It could be incredibly healing, sure, but it could also be your absolute worst nightmare. You would never, ever be able to hide from yourself again.
But here is the part nobody really wants to admit. Sure, at first, you and your clone are exactly equal, but eventually, your lives are going to branch off. What happens if you get a little lazy one week, but the clone stays super focused? What if you hesitate on a big decision, but the clone acts decisively and becomes wildly successful? You would be forced into this deeply unsettling modern tragedy of self-comparison.
You wouldn't just be comparing yourself to your friends on social media anymore. You'd be watching your own literal face succeed where your original self failed. They'd become a living, breathing symbol of everything you could have been. And this psychological crisis quickly gives way to a massive ethical danger when we pivot to the medical side of things. Think about the physical benefits for a second. A perfect tissue match, a life-saving biological reserve right there when you need it. But, hold on, are we creating a conscious being solely for spare parts? Would this clone know it was created just to be harvested? This throws us into a massive, unprecedented consent crisis. Because once a being has human consciousness, reducing them to mere biological hardware is, frankly, a moral atrocity. The question really isn't whether science can do this, it's whether we deserve the power to wield it.
And if we can't handle the medical ethics, how on earth do we handle the heart? Let's plunge into the total chaos of human connection for a second. If you're married or have kids, how does this even work? Does your partner love you, or does your clone count as the exact same person to them? Would your child see two parents, or just two weird versions of one parent? Would they feel safe, or just completely confused? Look, part of trust and love is the uniqueness of the individual, right? Knowing they are not replaceable. If someone absolutely identical can just step in and love your family exactly like you do, you really have to ask, do they love your soul, or just the pattern of your habits and your face? And outside the home, the world becomes incredibly dangerous. A clone with your exact DNA and your exact memories up to the moment of cloning is an absolute nightmare for law enforcement. It becomes the ultimate alibi. If a crime is committed, who did it? You or the clone? How could any surveillance system or court of law possibly prove which one of you pulled the trigger or stole money if you both share identical biology and memories? It would create this completely unsolvable mess where literally anyone could use their clone as the perfect scapegoat.
So the crucial point here is that society wouldn't just smoothly adapt to this new reality. It would violently fracture into totally opposed factions. You'd have ordinary people and philosophers seeing clones as the ultimate miracle of self-improvement, right? Meanwhile, religious leaders might view it as a total moral disaster and a profound violation of the human spirit. Some people would welcome them with open arms, others would fear them as threats or try to exploit them as property. The emotional reality on the ground would be far, far messier than any law could possibly control.
And that messy reality gets even worse when you actually map out the life cycle of this technology. Because what happens when you clone yourself again, and then again? Day one starts with just one clone. But by year 1, maybe you have 4. By year 5, you aren't really an individual anymore. You're a literal community of selves. This exponential spiral completely obliterates the entire concept of originality. I mean, if there are 8 versions of you walking around, carrying out entirely different lives and working different jobs, what does it even mean to be the original you?
Ultimately, this whole scenario forces us into a truly profound spiritual realization: identity fragmentation. Witnessing your clones evolve differently under different life conditions proves something really huge. You are not a sacred, unchanging stone. You are never just one fixed thing. Personality is a living, incredibly flexible process. You are essentially a collection of ongoing possibilities. Now, this realization could be incredibly liberating, showing us our endless potential to adapt. But it could also be deeply destabilizing, because almost everything we build our lives upon relies on the comforting idea of a fixed, single self.
So when you get right down to it, cloning yourself wouldn't really be about duplicating your physical body. It's fundamentally about identity. When we sit around and say we want a clone to handle our chores or our stressful jobs, what we're really expressing is a desperate, deeply human desire for a second chance. A chance to try again, to make fewer mistakes, and to finally live out the unlived parts of our lives. But if you actually met that second chance face-to-face, and you watch them grow, change, and perhaps even outshine you, you're left with one inescapable challenge. Once you are standing in a room, looking at a perfect, conscious copy of yourself, which version of you deserves to lead?